Alright guys, this is the Platinum 50% Super Dwarf, 50% mainland, probable het entry. The mom was a wild caught, I believe, Cody, and she proved out entry this year with a different clutch. This girl was actually born in March of 2012, so she's about a year and 2 months old, going on 3 months old now. Right now she just sheds, she's nice and bright. But this is kind of an example of what a little bit of the larger Super Dwarf locales will actually get to. At 1 year of age, most of your Super Dwarf crosses at 50% won't be this big. In fact, I'll show you my Kalatoa, who's not nearly this big, or nearly this girthy. But this Platinum, because she came from a Cody locale, the Cody is a much larger growing locale, and so you can expect these to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 11 to 12 feet and have some fairly sizable girth to them in the end. So yeah, this is the Cody Platinum probable het entry. Once again, roughly 14-15 months old now. Okay guys, this is a 50% Kalatoa. She's one of the smaller locales that you can get for the Super Dwarf populations. We have to keep in mind that Super Dwarf was a term that was coined for marketing. Bob Clark imported these really tiny retics that came from some smaller islands off the coast of Indonesia, and they didn't really get too big. The females were breeding at 6-7 feet and they were having successful young, and the young were really tiny in comparison to the mainlands, and so he kind of called them Super Dwarfs, and that's how we get the term. But this is the result of a second generation cross of a 50% Super Dwarf tiger with a 50% Super Dwarf tiger, both het for albino. So she's a tiger that's a second generation, 50% Kalatoa blood, 50% mainland. That's 66% probable for het white phase albino. This was a Travis Cube's offspring from the clutch that hatched out, and I believe early May of last year. So she's just over a year old, getting on to 13 months right now, and she's really sweetheart. You can see they handle real well. They don't get real flighty, they don't take off, and she's got a fairly good amount of size to her. Travis did mention to me that as soon as this girl gets to about 7 feet to go ahead and cut back on food. Right now she's pounding 1 to 2 large or extra large rats every single week. Sometimes she'll get a meal every 4th day just for fun, so that she stays nice and fit, and then every now and then we'll skip a couple meals just to make sure that she doesn't get obese. But you can see she's not obese. If anything, she's got a little bit of sausage bug going on here that she needs to take care of probably in the next day or so. So yeah, this is a tiger, 50% Super Dwarf for the Kalatoa, second generation cross, 66% probable het albino. Again, this one was bred by Travis Cubes, and it's 13 months old, roughly 6 feet long. Alright guys, to kind of compare it one more time with something similar but different. This was born in March of 2012, so we're looking at, you know, pretty good age, about the same age as the Platinum that we took a look at. This is a tiger motley het for purple albino, and the genetics behind it as far as locales go is pretty interesting. The mother to this snake was 50% Super Dwarf tiger Kalatoa, but also 25% Jampia, and 25% mainland, so it's a real small mother. But this girl was bred by a mainland motley albino male, so the actual ratios end up being that it's 25% Kalatoa, 12.5% Jampia, and then the rest of it is pretty much mainland, which is roughly 67.5%. They're about 62.5% actually. But this girl is a female, so they get a lot longer, and I would expect her to probably cap off around 12 to 14 feet. Maybe if fortunate, she may do really well at around 10 feet and not get much bigger than that. But the Super Dwarf blood from the Kalatoa actually just destroys the pattern. So when you get this mix of the motley and the tiger, and you put the Super Dwarf in there, it really does a lot to it. But again, we're showing you temperament-wise and size comparison. This girl's fairly big for being so much dwarf and Super Dwarf blood. And she wasn't too big when I got her, but I've pretty much kept her food up at proper levels. She's been getting an extra large rat every week, just like the Super Dwarf Tiger and just like the Platinum as well. So again, at 1 year and a few months of age, not too big. They're not these 9-10 foot monsters that people are talking about at 1 year, but they will get there, especially with the mainlands. And if you feed them pretty heavily, you'll get to that as well. So again, this is a Tiger Motley, 25% Kalatoa, 12.5% Gempia, and the rest is mainland. This is a female. Alright, taking another look at the yearlings. This girl is just about 15 months old. That's what most of my snakes are at this point for the reticulated pythons. I've got a few older ones that we're going to show you. But this girl is a Gempia, high percentage, somewhere around 62.5% Gempia. The rest is mainland, so she's kind of going to be a bigger girl. Her mom was 14 foot, dad was 12 foot. This is a purple albino reticulated python, and that Gempia really does a lot to the color, bringing out those oranges, and you can really see the strong contrast of the purple. And this is pretty much how she is right when I got her out of the cage. She's kind of wrapping my hand a little bit, making sure that I've got a good grip on her. But other than that, she's really not as flighty as you see with the Super Dwarfs, and the Gempia are very typical of that. But again, the Gempia are the ones that can get, if you're looking at the gas per Gempia, is up to 16, 17 feet. I mean, really monsters. But for the most part, Gempias actually from the islands only max out around 9 to 10 feet, and are very sexually mature at around 8 feet for the females. So again, this girl, she's just over 8 foot. She doesn't weigh too much, but she's actually getting fed 1.5 to 2 pound rabbits once a week to once every other week. It just kind of depends on what's going on and whether or not she's needing that extra food. So again, this is a 62.5% roughly Gempia, purple albino, nothing else going on there, reticulated python. So now by contrast, this is a pure Kalatoa. This is 100% Super Dwarf, and it is a male, which makes it just insanely tiny. But this boy is not real bitey. He's actually never bit. He's struck maybe once or twice, but you know, he likes to flee, and you know, the first few minutes out of the tank or out of the tub, he'll be okay. He'll just kind of sit, he'll relax, you'll see he's not moving too fast. He's very handleable. Give him about another 3 or 4 minutes though, and he'll start taking off and being very sporadic and unpredictable. But this is a anery line from Travis Cubes. This boy is about 2 years old now. A really beautiful snake, but he's not very big. And you know, we've looked at the other ones that have been yearlings, and you know, 1.5 years old. And this snake will be 2 years old and very well fed, eating on medium rats pretty consistently. Every now and then I'll give him a large rat just to kind of fill him up for 2 weeks. But he's got plenty of girth. He's very well tempered, very well fed snake, but he's just not very long. Like I said, with the pure Super Dwarfs, they don't get too big, and there are plenty of them out there. You just have to get them in the right time of season, buy from a trusted buyer, and you'll get something like this. Again, not all of them will be necessarily this docile. Most of them are going to be pretty flighty, most of them are going to be pretty bitey, especially the males. But he's, you know, really not too bad. And like I said, they're about the size of a corn snake. He's not going to get too much bigger than this. You know, I don't expect him to get maybe another foot, maybe a few more inches. No, not even that, probably another inch maybe in total girth. But this guy is anery, so he's antheristic. He's a key ingredient into snow projects. So he's actually going to go with one of my albino girls, and we're going to produce some Super Jamp snows for the near future. Alright guys, now in complete contrast to what we've been looking at, this is again still a 50% Super Dwarf, and it is a male. So this is a smaller what the females would be expected to get. But this is a first cross generation. This was a mainland tiger crossed to a wild-caught Kalatoa pure female. And this is the result that you get. A fairly large, good-bodied animal. This snake is around 5 to 6 years old at this point. And he's pushing very close to 10 feet. I'll be real careful getting him away from my neck. But this boy's pretty strong. But as far as Super Dwarfs go, you can still see that they're very lean snakes, and that's, you know, pretty good about all retics, is they're very lean snakes. So it's not like you've got the girth of an anaconda or Burmese python to deal with. You're just dealing with these more or less long but slender snakes. But this guy was born in March of this year, so you know, going on 3 months now. This is a 50% Gempia cross. Again, in comparison to a mainland, it is insane how much smaller even these crosses are with even such one of the larger locales, such as the Gempia. This was the result of a Gempia being bred to an albino golden child, which was a lavender golden child, meaning that this boy is golden child, 50% Gempia blood, het for albino, but because it was lavender as the parent, we don't know whether it's going to be white lavender or white albino or a purple albino. Alright guys, we're going to take a look at one more cross that I wanted to show you. This is a very underappreciated morph. This is the genetic stripe, and it's a fantastic, just fantastic snake. This is roughly a 62.5% outcrossing as well of dwarf blood, the rest being mainland. She was born sometime in, I believe, August of last year. So we're looking at about 10 months old. Not very big, very strong feeder. She gets fed 2 times a week. Just to try and keep her up with that first year of growth to see what we can do with her. So yeah, it's a pretty young snake. It actually didn't even start feeding sometime until mid-December, so it's only been growing on food for about 5 months now. It's definitely gained a lot of size when I first got her, and they will grow pretty quick even as the dwarfs. And that's kind of a key element to their size is the more you feed them when they're in their first year, the more they're going to grow. The less you feed them in the first year, that's kind of going to slow them down just a little bit, but you can still see that reproductive output later on with a slow-growing female.